Sorry to let you wait. Um, Starting like this. So, hello. Bit of a spontaneous one, and I'm not yet entirely sure how this will work. But I thought I had one coaching request, and he's actually, I don't know, I think he's Spanish, and we can't actually do the coaching live because the talking is a bit difficult because he's translating everything with Google. So the idea was to do a video for him that he can then translate one by one. So I thought maybe I just do the whole thing as a stream for once and then he can watch it later and translate it later as well. So basically what you're going to see then now is the whole process of a coaching session as it normally happens. Um, what comes with that is sometimes I don't know how these coaching sessions go, depending on the setup I'm getting or how good or bad the driver is. So it's all a bit in the open what we are going to do. But all coaching usually starts with me driving a reference lap with the setup I was giving and with the session settings that I was given, even though in this instance I didn't really receive the session settings. So and since the lap time gap is quite large, I don't think it will happen too much. So what we're gonna do is spa, I hope, as the thumbnail already explained in a way. And he sent over a setup for the Porsche. Why do people torture themselves with a Porsche? Anyway, I'll do it. So he sent over a setup which was called Aggressivo. So I guess it's going to be fairly stock. An average coaching session, so they're all 80, so the average is also 80 euros. Pretty easy to do the average. Yeah. Okay, so I already have his lab here in Motec. We'll later switch over to the other PC over there because it's much easier on a 1080p screen once we have the reference lab in. So let's, for now, start ACC. Look in the setup, how much fuel he has. Let's just assume hot lap. And yeah, see how this goes. I'll probably need a couple laps to get accustomed to the Porsche. Usually, driving the Porsche also means I have to increase my steering wheel angle because the Porsche has an awful lot more than the BMW has. But it has it for a reason. So it's set to 700, which of course is too little. The Porsche has 800. So that's done already. And yeah, of course, since the chat is right next to me, we can then discuss the data and the replay, what I see, and you bring your questions in or ideas, or maybe I'll leave a corner to you or whatever. So single player, for the avoidance of doubts, let's do this in form of a practice session. Oh, it's already Spa. It's already the wrong car. Do not mind this time. This is probably in tortellini temps. So where is the Porsche? There you go. Do we also have a pretty version of that? That is horrible ugly. That... No. 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 This one would be good. I don't even know why I have that livery. ACC is adjusting the steering automatically, but still in the driver I need to define the maximum it can use. And if I tell my steering wheel to only use 700 degrees, then the Porsche will be even more sensitive than it already is. Interesting liveries I have here. I don't even know why. But it explains why I do have loading times sometimes. Anyway, let's choose this one. And really hope I don't hit myself after this. So this is the standard hot lap thingy here. You could use the cloudy preset, results in the same as this one, but I got really depressed from all the gray. So this is the new preset with the same temperatures. In sunlight. The round wheel Porsche? Oh, you mean like number 1? Or you mean the Cup Porsche? Gotcha. Okay, so he sent over a setup. That is probably no secret to a setup called Aggressivo, though I do not see it. Why do I not see it? Because I did not press paste. Horrible. Stupid. 1 second. Just have to bring up the file. Should be quick. There's the replay. Oh yeah, he sent it on Discord. Sorry, just a second. Should be sorted in a second. Where is he? There. No, not Panky. Don't think he'd answer me anyway. Download 2. ACC setups. Where's the Porsche? P usually, and Spa. Aggressivo. It's already here. Why does it not? I'm confused. Is it the other Porsche maybe? Should be this one. So, one more time. Ah, there you go. Got it. So, yeah, each car has a different steering angle. On the Discord, we have an overview in one of the channels. What about this stream? So Igor, what I'm doing is, there was one guy who requested a coaching, but he doesn't speak fluent English, so I thought I'd just record it, then he can translate it later. So I'm going you through the whole process of what I do during a coaching basically, and it starts with me doing a reference lab in somewhat similar conditions to what he did. Even though he wasn't so fast, he did a 2:21 in the Porsche, so it will be rather easy to beat, which means it doesn't really matter what I do here. We're looking at principles rather than ultimate lap time at the end of the day. So let's see. So he had the 62 liters. So let's just assume he was driving with half full tank. Really looks like the aggressive preset. Most of the thingies here. So I'm not going to change too much. Telemetry is on, very important. Tires might just about fit. Let's see if the temperature is guessed correctly. Yeah, that's pretty much the aggressive preset, I guess. So let's just take it and hope it doesn't kill too much. I hope they adjusted the aggressive preset on Spa, else it explains an awful lot of the difficulties he might be having. The game will adjust it automatically. For instance, it has 480 and the Porsche has 800. Yes, yeah, you got this, right? And you're right here, 800 is here already. And now, if I turn the steering wheel green light. Go. Half a rotation, then it's about right. Full rotation, so we're synced. Let's hope I don't regret this car. I probably will. I'm already sick how I'm looking into the ground. So the target is just now to drive a couple laps, have a clean lap that can act as a reference lap. So I'm not trying to push or so, I'm just trying to give, well, not ideal, but repeatable inputs that it's something he could take on board. Okay, let's see how the aggressive preset drives. That's on the understeery side. Okay, but the as aggressive preset definitely is drivable, so I feared that this is one of those preset setups that Kunos didn't fix. But apparently this is drivable, or he fixed it himself. And of course, because this is supposed to be a coaching, I'm not changing anything to the setup. I'm just driving with the exact same thing that he was using. Very weird to drive the Porsche here right now, because of course we're preparing for the 24-hour race in the BMW already. And I have no clue how Tortellini does a 214 in this car, even if it's cold, because it doesn't move on this rate, it's parking. Moving all braking points a bit later already. Oops. Okay, a bit early on throttle here. Probably takes a couple laps to it. Their pressures look fine though, I think. Maybe the rears could take a little more, but I guess this is just fine. Let's hope we can go flat out. Yeah. Bit of in and out, but flat out worked. So this is a good sign. The setup is drivable. That's always the first thing I need to check, because sometimes people who are new to the game don't really know how a setup must feel. And then they just accept when the setup is undrivable and try to work around it. But doesn't seem to be the case here. So the coaching doesn't end at you're driving a wrong setup, which is good. Because then we can do the stream. Ah, Tobias, schauen wir mal. I just have to work with not getting any oversteer on throttle in downforce corners. By the looks of it, we're driving everything a gear higher than in the BMW, for example. It will take me a moment to go through all the questions, alright, but I'll have to get the driving in first, else the stream can't really proceed. Okay, so I've beaten his time for a start. Okay, now I'm looking better. Just waiting a tiny bit longer for the throttle pedal there, and then the car's straighten and can take it flat out more easily. Looking good. Oh my, that thing is so dead on this straight. Hey Tortellini. It's a shame that you already have the Porsche driver in here now, so I don't necessarily look bad, but maybe you can come in and help a bit once I go into the comparison. Still invalid. But yeah, need a couple laps to warm up with this. So I'm trying to beat the 221. I've succeeded with that already. It's insane how late you can brake with a Porsche. Sometimes late, sometimes not so much. Before you ask, this is the aggressive preset. Yeah, so for those who just joined, I'm just kind of doing a coaching session live for a guy who doesn't speak fluent English. So I'm kind of recording this and trying this format as a live stream. And I'm doing this from scratch basically, so I have to start with doing the reference lap with his setup in his conditions. So I think with a bit of luck it might be a 217. And again, I'm not trying to push very hard, I'm just trying to do a lap with clean inputs that give us something to look at and compare. So again, off track, so it's gonna take a few laps. Twice as fast. Again, I'm aiming at clean, not world record. And I think for world record we are 20 degrees too warm or so. So, on track here, but not in Eau Rouge. Working with the pitch a bit on the brake. And wish there was less squat on the throttle. Interesting. Braking in most corners you can do later in the Porsche. Just into Stabilo it struggles a bit. So I have to be earlier there actually. So for next lap I should be set. Nah, there's nothing nice about the Porsche. Nothing. Not a single thing. Thanks, Ken. So at least need a valid lap here. Uh, 23-28 standard basically. And I have 62 liters in the aggressive preset here. This is more drivable than I thought, to be honest. Not really aggressive preset. More a drivable version of the Porsche. Oh dear. Definitely need a few more laps, but that's the usual thing in the coaching. I give myself like half an hour to set a decent lap time. And then the rest of the time paid basically is for the coaching itself. And then as a whole it takes like 19 minutes of my time. Yeah, the car's a bit on the understeery side, but it's fine. I expected worse, so this is good for beginners. Thought it would be undrivable. Still not valid, come on. And missed the corner, nice. Okay, so I think I'm warm. Let's get a new tire set and make it count. Okay. Lever. Turn on, you piece of shit. Yeah, I wish there was a validity check for temperature as well. I was expecting there would be a lot more throttle work needed in the corner to keep the rear in check, but this is absolutely fine here. Rotate! The gearing of the Porsche is kind of in between here as well, right? Second gear too short, third too long. If you use the curb, it rotates. So getting there. Yeah. One of those features we're never gonna get. Instead, we'll get a 90-minute hot stint leaderboard in green track or so. Green drying track or something like that. Okay, so pressures are with me. Seen better corners. So let's say a maximum of 10 laps and then should be good. When do we shift up here? Way too early on the brakes here. So many places where you can off-track when the car is understeering. As fuck. Oh. That's a new line, guys. Turn on the grass for rotation. Yeah, okay, I'm getting a hang of it. Come on! Wait, Rouge in 6? Oh dear. That early? I'll try. So you're rather low in the RPM range all the time? And Toby Pepper. Really, 6 or Rouge? Shall I try this? Not sure this is faster, is it? Because I still don't have a delta. Finally. So let's not ref it too much then, if Tortellini says you don't need to. At least Blanchiment is flat. I think this lap does. That was clean, no major mistake, maybe into no name a bit too oversteering. So save the replay. Go to the garage to save the telemetry. And then this part of the coaching is done. And now I'll actually have to switch screens. Else I can't really do the coaching. You'll see why, because the 1080p thing is gonna mess with everything here. All right, switching over to the other screen. Let's hope this doesn't kill things. Let me organize my scene. I prepared the other camera. Nice, what's that, 10 FPS? So we now have Tortellini cam. And the next thing we'll need is display raw, is it? That looks very much like it. And then we'll drag Motec over there. Let me have the webcam on here as well. You tell me, please, once the webcam is kinda in the way of something or so. Then we have this. Now we'll need the game again, and I'll also need the chat, which is here. Good. You can tell I'm trialing this the first time, so a bit of mess setting it all up, but we'll be ready in a second. This is good. Now I can restart the game, hopefully. So I can already load my lab as well. Bring the microphone into my face. That should be the one. You see, I didn't drive the Porsche for quite a while. Like half a year more, 8, 9 months. That's how much I love it. So now we have his time and we have mine in comparison, and we'll have a look at this mainly. Now I just need to bring over the game. Turn the audio down a bit because we're not needing much of that. Change the video. And I'm about to be ready. There you go. Enable and disable. Yep. And then all we need is the pen and the chat backup. Okay. Majority of the work is done, I think. Setting it all up. What do you mean someday? Shakes don't know what you're getting. What a name. Probably don't need the gloves anymore. And now what we'll need is his replay. So mine from today, his from yesterday. And then over to Motec to see which lab was it of his. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it should be this one. Just checking the dash. But this looks like his quickest 21.3. So this is the lab we're going to look at. Is this working here? Is it? Is it? Is it? Crazy. Okay, so I got the chat going, guys. All right. And I have my tools here. This is the most important tool, so I can paint things here. You get the idea. And for now, I think we're just going to stick to the HUD. The Viper doesn't have Caesars, it's realism. Rear splitter? You mean the wing, I guess. Anyway, okay, so how this works is I just move forward in the lab and view it once. Just get a rough idea. And I'll jump forward because we don't need to look the straights, just to be a bit more efficient. Let's see if he takes a flat out. He's also in 6, so he had some of the tortellini school already. But taking a bit too easy there. Fast forward to the corner, let's see how this looks. Yeah, you can tell he's very, very cautious with the steering wheel. So if we just look at that again, you can also see the braking there, right? But we'll go in detail afterwards. Just cruising around the corners there. Weeps a cringe. Twitch is also running if you just want to watch it there. Okay, so holding throttle for a long time there. Overslowed probably. What you can see he does right already. He knows where the car needs to be, right? He does the whole inside-outside thing. So we're not starting from scratch, which is important. Maybe I can put the camera somewhere else as well. Struggles with the understeer here a bit too, but I guess that is fine. Hello. Just overall caution. We'll go corner by corner. Doesn't look too bad, but there's still like 3 seconds lost, right? That we need to find. Yeah, probably half a second or more. Just the exit of Stavelo, I think, or so. Dampers cat. The histocat. Yeah, you probably fine here. Yes. I mean, he's using all the line, which is good. Okay, so let's start over and the crucial information is always in the data. So we have the speed, we have the pedal inputs, and we have the steering angle down here, then the gears. And basically where I start the coaching is then, I can compare the track conditions, actually. Unless he tells me. So the first checks I usually do is, I just basically take a look, is he steering excessively in some places, right? Does he have the double or twice the steering input as I have, or does he have half the steering input as I have? But overall, this seems somewhat in line, okay? So no worst case scenarios. So then we're just making very easy checks here. Is the brake working? So does he get up to 100%? Yes, he does. Does he get up to 100% on the throttle? Yes, he does. So we can definitely live with, or we can already agree that the pedals are working, the steering wheel is working. And now into the details. Breaking point, for example, we can see, okay, this is pretty much the same as I have. So he also kind of found this already. Not the concern. Downshifts are somewhat happening to the same amount. So he's, well, actually not. He's shifting up one more on start finish. So let's take a look how the speed difference is before the upshift. So I'm 1.5 kilometers ahead, somewhat after the upshift. Well, still 1.5 ahead. So this is not costing him time there. Doing his downshifts, we end up both in the same gear coming for the corner, which is the first. So also not an issue there. We're just looking to find those differences. And the main difference we can see is it's really in somewhere in the braking, right? So while it starts the same, he reaches 100% a bit quicker. Sorry, need to bring this more to the middle and you can also see it. So it takes him, for example, if we just want to measure it, it takes him, where is it? 1/10 to reach 100% braking. It takes me 2/10, but that's just a load cell thing. The brake cell is a stepped line because it's just 1/10, and in that 1/10 you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that measurements. That's why. If you zoom out, it becomes less of a jagged edge, right? I mean, there's only so many data points in a short amount of time. That's why it's a bit jagged. So some difference here on how quickly we reached 100%, but this is totally fine. No issue whatsoever. You can just tell either he doesn't have a load cell, or the load cell is put rather soft, or he has Logitech or Thrustmaster pedals. And just reaches 100% a bit quicker. So then throughout the whole braking zone, I have a bit of an advantage just because it takes me longer to reach 100%. Also, not something of concern. How do I get rid of this cursor thingy? Go die, cursor. Can you disappear? How does cursor disappear? Hello? Actually, I don't know. Escape? No. Anyway, put it there. The main thing that we're seeing is, now we're getting to the details, okay? If we check his line, you'll see this in the steering trace. He's going straight for quite a bit longer. I think so when my turn-in, I think, starts somewhere about here, and his turn-in starts somewhere about here. So this is the first little difference. He keeps the car straighter for longer. That's the first tiny thing you can see, which is not necessarily an issue. And this should be reflected in his line, that he's keeping the car on the outside very long here, right? If we view this from a bit higher above, he's sticking to the outside line for quite some time and has a rather late turn in, which is perfectly fine if he makes it work, right? I think line-wise, middle of the corner, the car has a nice angle already pointing more for the apex than you'd normally expect, right? So he's aiming for a late apex and can put the power down there. So this, I think, is fine. The main difference, though, will be that he has this very harsh braking input here all the way. Now the turn-in starts. Let's slow it down a bit. So the turn-in starts now, right? He starts to turn the wheel, keeps turning the wheel. And until now, he has not done a single change on... I'm not reading all the chat, guys. Come on. Now, I press space for cursor, it doesn't disappear. So by now, he has some turning angle, say, what's that, 40 degrees or something, but he's still committed fully to the brakes. And the problem is the front tire only has so much grip. And right now he's just asking more grip from the front tire than it actually has. So this is the first moment he'll create a tiny amount of understeer, where the car is just not really responsive to the turn and input that he does. Right, the car basically keeps going straight, 90-degree turning angle, which is quite a lot on the Porsche already. This is also being streamed to YouTube, Zero, so it will be there as, thank you, Patrick. So we'll be there as a VOD. So by just basically just now he starts releasing the brake, and this is what you will be seeing here. Definitely starts a bit earlier for me, right? And I'm kind of doing this diagonal line. And if I had to paint this, it will look something like this. And now my painting skills will come into play. So his line very much on the outside here, very late, and then someone starts to turn in. And pretty much till this point, he's fully committed to the brake. And then for me, since I was somewhere here, and then my turn in will start a bit earlier. That's what I try to show here. My turn will start here, and then I have more of a diagonal line towards the corner, which is a bit difficult to paint with the scale I chose here. Let me redo the yellow line. That was smart. So we'll be somewhere a diagonal line here, and then I'm just deeper into the corner, something like this or so. And he's just making a choice there to stay longer outside, but harder on the brake, and there's quite a overlap between a lot of turning angle and a lot of braking where the car is just not responding to his input. And this way he ends up wide. He probably has a perception of the car understeering, so he thinks speed is the issue, so he keeps braking and kind of keeps the understeer going for even longer. So basically his initial understeer he's creating makes him think he has to brake more, which creates more understeer. So in a way he was creating his own problem, then he was creating his own wrong perception, and then he kept on creating the problem. I think line-wise, the choice is fine. He just has an issue with controlling when he wants to turn in and when the car really follows his steering input. That's, I think, the main issue that we want to look out here. The overlap of the steering and the braking input, and therefore Motec is the much better thing to show. So basically in this whole area from here to here, for a total of, 30 meters or so, which is down here, that's the number, he's having a very harsh overlap of a lot of braking input and a lot of steering input. And this will cause the car to understeer, which will make him think he needs to brake more because he's going too fast, which creates more understeer. And then suddenly he finds himself middle of the corner with, as you can see down here, pretty much 10, 11 kilometers down on me. And every time, maybe we can see this better when I zoom out a bit, every time you see someone having the speed plateau somewhat through the corner there, where the speed stays flat or the same, you know someone has overslowed the car, because essentially you want to have one deceleration zone, one acceleration zone, but you don't want to have prolonged amounts of time where the car is traveling at the same speed. So you could also say, okay, when your speed is largely unchanged throughout the corner, it's very likely you're having an issue with your braking. And it's very, very typical to have the combination of the plateau in the speed trace and the lack of trail braking, because then he overslows the car from the perceived understeer, then he stops the braking, then he rolls through the corner, and then he picks up the speed. How does this look in terms of lap time lost? Actually not that bad, right? He's losing something on the entry, but he has the car nicer lined up for the exit, for aiming for a late apex, straightening the car up there. And then he gets back, well, he loses like 2/10 going into the corner, gains 1 back, stays 1/10 behind basically for the exit there. Yeah, that's true, Patrick. So he's basically creating where are we? Here, sorry. He creates his own understeer, then creates more understeer. So basically in this phase, up until here, to this point, he understeers from asking too much of the tire, then he releases the brake, and here probably he understeers from actually turning the steering wheel too little, because there's more to have from the front tire now. The other, it's not really an issue because he gains back the time, but am fairly sure that him taking so much time to go into full throttle will cost him some time additionally. He would probably be able to build even more speed if he was more harsh on throttle. Just viewing this in cockpit once more in slow motion. And up until here is fine. Now, yeah, you can see how early the throttle is there. Let's do it one more time. So here, half speed, middle of the corner. Now the throttle comes in. He knows, okay, I should be accelerating, but he doesn't really dare to. So basically, right now, he's just stopping the car from decelerating further. But I might be stretching things here. So in the end, he's gaining some of the speed back for having the very late apex. So this is good. I guess, if anything, in this corner, it starts with the lack of trail braking, which costs him time on the entry because the car doesn't want to rotate according to his steering input because he's overloading the front tire with too much brake input. Then, very difficult through Orush, he's losing like 1/10. This is probably not too much of a concern, so we can go quicker through that. Let's see, it's probably just a line difference here. This is fine. Yeah, I think basically, probably, let's be really precise here. It's not so visible in the steering input, but it seems like he's not letting the car run wide. So what I'd normally want to tell him then here is, slow it down. Now he's into the corner, and by now he knows, now you're making the corner, right? Because if we probably have to go higher a bit. Now the car is in a position where it's easily going to stay within the track limits, right? This is very easy to keep across there. But he keeps turning a bit, which just costs him a bit of speed onto the straight. So by now he probably should open the steering wheel, let the car run freely, build the speed and carry it onto the straight. And this is basically what is going to cost him the time there. Just a bit too much turning angle for too long, because now he's well too much within the track limits, right? It's just a tiny bit. Nothing major though. Oh, again, the Bermudas. So welcome again. Next braking zone, and let's stop before he actually starts the braking. And look into the Motec, if we can already spot something there. First thing you can see is where the time now starts fading away of him, right? So first sector, he is perfectly fine. He loses 2/10 to me, probably 2.5 or 3 to Tortellini. But now it really starts to get away from him, right? So the next section, Les Combes as a whole, is like worth half a second. And most of it already in the two corners, the right and the left, whereas the exit of the section is pretty much all right for him. Doesn't cost him too much in comparison. So we want to see why is he so uncomfortable going through there. Braking point, I think he has figured out. Map 8 in the Porsche is just a quick one. It's just how the car is. So he perfectly fine there. Off throttle, onto the brake. Looks very similar. Let's say, if you want to be really picky, then he's going into the brake here. And now it takes him about... Okay, again, as I say, picky. It takes him about 1/10 to go off the throttle as well. And then it takes really, really long for him to go completely out of the throttle until here. 2.5/10 looks much worse when you zoom in so much. But right, he's just somehow lazy on the throttle to really let go by the point he decides he wants to slow down. So usually you want to have this in sync, right? You go onto the brake, you go off the throttle at the same time, not at different times. All right, but I think braking point fine. That would be interesting why I build speed in the braking zone here. Very interesting, to say the least. But let's look at the replay. So the overall braking, I'd say, looks very similar. So there's something wrong where he doesn't dare to turn in. Slow down a bit. Okay, first thing, he doesn't move onto the curb as much as I do, right? If you remember the laps I just did, I always put the outside tire as close to the grass here as possible, right? Gaining extra tracks, probably 30, 40, maybe 50 centimeters or so. And that's some track he could still be using. But let's keep it in the cockpit. Okay, similar thing, kind of. I have an idea already, but let's work towards that. So during this phase here, it's somewhat similar, right? On the curb, I do my turn-ins. Sorry, the scale is a bit difficult to see there because it's so small. Maybe we get a bit more of this. So you can see the turning angle a bit better. We don't really need the gearing as much. So a bit more on the turning here. We about choose the same point in time, but you can also see his steering input is really, really smooth there, which tells me he's probably using Logitech T300 or so. He doesn't get so much feedback from the car that my wheel is always kind of reacting to, in a way. So there's again the overlap of the turning angle with maximum amount of braking, which is on low levels not necessarily the issue. The issue is once he comes off the brakes here, which he does rather quickly, all of a sudden he frees up a lot of capacity on the front tire, which usually means the front tire will grip up and go towards the direction the steering wheel is pointing. And you can see that he probably had issues before when he comes off the brake so quickly that he had a higher turning angle and the car would veer into the corner and he loses the rear. So what I'm thinking is he has a bit of a learned hesitation here because the car was penalizing him before, coming off the brake rather quickly with the turning angle applied, and the oversteer then would always surprise him. That's what you can see me do here basically, is giving the car a bit of a turn in, waiting for the rear to settle again, give the car a bit of turn in, the rear steps out, I'm catching it again, commit to the corner, have a bit longer trail braking phase, definitely, right? It's short for me as well, but it's at least twice or 3 times as long as his. It's a stretch, 2 times. And then when I come off the brake, exactly here, I'm committing to a much higher turning angle because there's a different way to deal with the oversteer that's coming when you lift off the brake rather quickly, and that is to enforce the understeer back into the car. I'm pretty sure that either it was the coming off the brake with his turning angle, the rear steps out, or he clips the inside curb with little turning angle applied and the rear steps out. And one way to deal with being scared of that curb, because it creates additional rotation for the car, is to actually apply more turning angle, as you'll see me do. More than you'll see him do, but apply as much as I do. So his maximum somewhere here over the curb is, what's that, something like 80? Somewhere here or so. Motec says less. So somewhere here, and you just see my steering input is always quite a bit above his. So I'm enforcing. Yeah, he misses the line. That's on top, I think. But I think this more comes from the hesitation, right? So the issue for him is the hesitation. It's not like he doesn't know where the line is. I think he got scared in the process of learning the track and the car, lifting off the brake that quickly. The rear becomes loose, and now he's just really, really cautious into the section. And one way to work around the loose rear is to or kind of change where the limit of the car is. Right now for him, the rear end is the limit. So every time he does a turning input, the front has still room to react and the rear becomes loose. And to work around that, what I do is I put the limit on the front axle by turning a tiny bit too much, which is like, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees more than what the front tire would actually like. And this creates the understeer and stability, and the rear will suddenly be in check. And this is what I do here through this corner, which allows me to attack the curb much more confident. So when the rear gets loose here on the Porsche, which is a typical thing to do, you apply a bit more turning angle to create the understeer and the car will be stable again. And I think it's only really the entry for him that is all the issue, because now he's offline for the left-hander and he will also always lose time here. I think he does it fine with the turning angle, right? He has the same idea here. He's not as sudden with his steering inputs, so he's always a bit more smooth, a bit more scary with the car. Nah, it's not Alonso style. Alonso was way more extreme, and the car was also designed for this way of driving. So he had probably 30, 40, 50 degrees more turning angle on the steering wheel than the other guys. This is more subtle here. You want to be, the difference here is 15 degrees, which is something like, so this is 90, this is 105, right? So it's not that much. It's, you want to feel the front axle, and then you go a bit over it. Yeah, you're right. But we have to work on one lap in the end. But he's doing consistent 2022s, right? So it's not entirely out of line. And if it's in the practice session, the tire also fades away a bit. So I guess more or less, this is what he's capable of. We could look at another lap as well, but then it just makes the whole thing a lot more complex. And you can see the whole steering inputs he's having are very similar, right? It's the same cautiousness, it's the same suddenness out of the brake, it's the same hesitation on the throttle that he's having. So I would assume this is somewhat of a pattern for him. Yeah. Okay, so I think the left-hander then is just an aftermath really of the right-hander and being too cautious there, and he just doesn't have a way to deal with the amount of rotation he's getting going off the brake too quickly. So one advice could be, let's try to ease off the brake a bit slower, put a bit of trail braking in there, and then when you feel the rear getting loose, actually apply a bit more turning angle to get the stability back in the car instead of being really scared and always be on the lookout for the rear. Rather than waiting for the car to do something, you can enforce something on the car, and then you're back in charge. And enforcing that bit of understeer here through a tiny bit, what looks to him right now as too much turning angle, can actually help get the stability there. And then he can also carry more speed through the left-hander here, which I think he has figured out. Everything here looks rather similar, and it's really just an aftermath of the right-hander he doesn't know how to deal with. Then, let's just check further here. I think line-wise this is fine. The liftoff is fine. He doesn't lift completely, which I think is also a thing you want to do sometimes on the Porsche. When you lift the throttle completely, the car is very pitch sensitive, right? The front goes closer to the ground. The downforce balance changes. The car goes really aggressive into the corner. And if you keep a tiny bit of throttle here on entry, ease out of the throttle a bit more gentle, and you can see me doing the same, right? I go off throttle, hold it a bit there to give the car more time to go into the corner and not lose the rear here. So he has this right. He has a few techniques he's already deploying, which are the right way to go. He really just messed up the entry to the com, which I think cost him the most amount of time, and everything else is really a follow-up to this initial mistake there. Then I think into the throttle, he could just be more aggressive. Because if you take your time here, what you're going to see is, now let's go to the wheel speeds, because that's the interesting part. What you're going to see is, look at this here. Okay, this is basically just the left side rear wheel minus the speed of the right side rear wheel. And every time this is not on the middle, both rear wheels are spinning at independent speeds. So you can see every time you're off throttle, you can see the outside wheel spins faster than the inside wheel because the differential is opening. The outside tire is able to drive around the inside of the car because it has to do the longer line, which is all good. And now the issue for him becomes when he goes into the throttle here, middle of the corner, he's going into the throttle rather easily. And now at a point, something like, in this case, 57% throttle, the rear tires are being locked together by the differential again. And this causes the car to understeer, which is a very typical thing you see people do. They ease into the throttle, then the understeer starts, and then they become more hesitant on the throttle even because they think they're not making the corner. If, though, you are aware of this whole differential stuff going on, then you just slam the throttle and pray the rear end loses a bit of grip to give you rotation. Because you're trying to work around the locking diff forcing you to understeer, and then just being harsh on the throttle, you can see I actually lose grip on the tire, which allows me to rotate the car much more aggressive out of the corner, build a bit more speed on the exit here, quite a bit actually. If we go back to here, then the speed difference on the exit is like 14, 15 kilometers. And this I will keep on the short straight here. Oh, sorry, that was... I'm so bad. That was the exit of the left-hander, but same principle applies, right? He's getting the diff lock out of the left-hander. Fuck my life, man. Here, he's very hesitant, creates the understeer for a short amount of time. Let's hope I can say the same thing now for the right-hander here. There you go. Right here has the whole throttle thing going on where he doesn't really dare to allow the rotation in the car. Typical thing when you look too deep into the data. So I'm having a harsher off-throttle moment here. Much more turn-in into the right-hander. Again, working with the enforced understeer into the right-hander there. And he tries to keep the car stable this time, always having the throttle applied, giving the differential a bit of lock to get the car stability. So there's just two ways to do this. And he chose to, let's be easy on the throttle here, keep the rear end, keep a bit of diff lock going, limit the amount of rotation of the car by deploying some throttle, whereas I am much more aggressive with the car and work around the excessive rotation by deploying a bit more turning angle down here. In this corner almost twice as much as he does, but still I think fairly within the limits of what the front tire can do. He's really just not at the limit there. I'm building 7 kilometers more on the exit then from much harsher throttle application, doing the same thing that I was just talking about for the wrong corner before. All right. So onto the straight, gaining another 10th for me. Next braking zone. Let's have a look at the very long right-hander. Yes, same emotion towards the Porsche there. So braking earlier there, stopping the trail braking much earlier, and then you can see he's very early back into the throttle for the long right-hander because he has to keep the speed up. And what you can see again then here is the speed plateau throughout the whole of the corner, whereas for me you can really see the V in the shape of the steering speed trace there as well. No, I think everybody insulting the Porsche should get a ribbon. Okay, so let's look at the corner at least. So this is fine, holding the throttle here, right? So he's very cautious on the steering wheel again, holding the throttle, testing the limits of the car, then understeering through the exit there, another hesitation there on the throttle. Very shortly there, because he's scared of not making the corner within the track limits. Anyway, next braking zone. Have to move forward a bit. Very cautious on the steering angle again. Takes almost 2/3 of the corner to reach the maximum steering angle. Bit more back. One more time and a bit slower. First thing you'll notice, hard braking. Turning angle increases, quite a bit of overlap between, until here pretty much, turning angle and braking. So he'll again create some sort of understeer here somewhere, but you can see me doing the same. The difference might be, and I think we need to zoom in here even more. Let's mark this point and go to here or so. You can see that when I start the braking, I already have turn in. And he's starting to brake in a straight line, and his turn in is happening later where the green cursor is now. Which means, for the whole of the corner, yes. So right now, he is doing very similar to what we had in turn, how do we do this best here? This could be. Very similar to turn 1 actually, that what he'll have is this very straight braking here and then tiny bit of turning angle. The car responds a bit, he keeps braking very hard, then goes off the brake, suddenly the car goes into the corner and he has reduced so much speed that from here on onwards or so he needs throttle to keep the car going and somewhere on the track. Because he keeps reducing speed, his line would be possible to do something like this, right? So he needs to keep the speed up to keep on this line, right? And he's way too early, too slow in the corner. Now he has to keep the speed up. Whereas my line, as the braking starts, I'll immediately start to turn in. I mean, all this is an exaggeration, okay, just to make a point here. So my braking line will be a diagonal one, which allows me to brake a bit deeper into the corner because I don't need too much turning angle applied because I'm braking in a straight line that is diagonal towards the corner. Then I'll have, I'm exaggerating again, somewhat of a first apex here, so I'm close to the inside of the corner, but I still carry too much speed. And now I'll basically overshoot his line, run a bit wide in the corner here, let's say I'm exaggerating, yeah? Really keep that in mind. I'm exaggerating. Don't drive outside of the black line here. I'm just trying to make the point. Then middle of the corner. This here is where my trail braking is going to stop. And then the car is doing a lot of rotation here. Off the throttle, off the brake, the car rotates a lot, comes back to the inside for a second apex later here. And this will be the main difference, whereas he has an apex, which is basically the entire corner. Oh, that was a bad painting. His apex is basically the entire inside curb is his closest to the inside position for the entire corner, whereas I have two very defined exits. So it's a very much different line. And if you want to paint this very, very exaggerated, then of course I'm driving this V into the corner here. Okay, this is a V top down in this way, where he is basically driving a U into the corner. Okay, that's the main difference. So I'll have more speed up until the middle point of the V. There I'll be slower, and then I'll be faster again on the exit. And I hope this is an exact representation of what we're going to see in Motec here. Okay, zoom out a bit. So, and you see the same V in the speed trace then. Okay, so I'm faster throughout the whole of the braking zone, but then I'm slower middle of the corner. 11 kilometers difference middle of the corner. I'm much slower in the corner, but I'm much faster on the exit here of the corner. 15, 16 kilometers. Okay, and if we look from braking point into the long right-hander to the braking point for no name, the difference is 3/10 that I'm winning with this technique. Okay, 3. It doesn't look that much, right? But it's 3/10 I'm gaining from doing this different approach, trailing the brake a lot deeper, a lot longer into the corner, right? He does some trail braking, so he's definitely capable of this. This is a good sign. So he knows the technique, and he has found a way to somewhat play with the brake. Sideways is never a good way to go. Not in a GT3 that's heavily downforce based. So I wouldn't. And then what you see him, he has overslowed the car very early on in the corner. Then he needs the throttle here to keep the car on the track, basically, to not run too far on the inside on the grass. Yeah, it's a very fine point that you need to hit there. And then you need to trail really, really deep and need to be really cautious because the corner is downhill. The Porsche doesn't have a lot of grip on the front anyway, so it needs even more careful trail braking. Then very gentle into the coasting phase with quite a bit of turning angle applied to keep the car understeery and stable. Because if you do something, the Porsche is just very sensitive, right? The rear is always wanting to step out on you. So he has found a way to keep the rear in check with throttle. I kept a way to keep the rear in check with a bit more turning angle applied here. And then into the throttle, open up the steering, have a bit of hesitation there because the rear steps out, waiting for the rear to settle, then commit to a tiny bit of a correction there, pick up the speed into or until no name. Let's look at no name then. Or first let's look at his line. How's he actually managing? So now, long apex, 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 right? Takes forever, the corner. And he's very passive throughout the corner as well. He's just waiting for when does this shit end. Definitely not using all the track on the exit, so he probably could have been into the throttle earlier, but I like the compromise of coming over to the right side here very quickly. But then again, he has put the car in a very nice position here. Actually, so he has a lot of time now to position the car nicely for no name, but he's by far not aggressive enough to get the car over to the right side. Just to paint this, so he is doing a line now. He's basically in charge of where to place the car, and so the line he's doing is he's taking his time, then he's coming slowly over to the right side here, and then he turns into so. But what you want to do is you want to be much more aggressive. Coming over to the side, line up the car with the curb on the outside and drive in a straight line along the curb. Along the curb, be already straight and not come in a diagonal line towards the outside curb. Because what happens next is he's just taking away mental capacity from himself. Because right now, at this angle where he's driving, his eyes still need to focus on, okay, am I going to clip the curb? If, how much am I going to to clip it here? Is this going to cause oversteer into the braking zone? Will I even clip the grass? And he just has all his focus on not fucking up, putting the car over to the right side. And then the braking zone is so short, he's probably missing the entry into no name, or he makes the car deliberately slower or brakes a little earlier because he has no time to refocus his eyes basically onto where he needs them, which is on the apex. So in order to get this done, you want to be done with the transitioning over to the right side a bit earlier, straighten up the car towards that curb so you can stop focusing positioning the car on the curb, and then you can basically not focus on this thing at all because the car is already parallel to the outside curb and you are in a very safe position, not clipping the grass on the outside there or something, right? And you can entirely focus on the apex, and it gives you so much more headroom to go for this corner. And that's the whole trick here, right? It's not about what's happening to the car, it's more a mental thing going into this corner. Have the car ready to actually take the corner and have your head ready to have enough time to focus on the important parts on the track. Okay. Overall, I think line is fine. Again, he has the throttle play middle of the corner, so we'll probably see this here in the data as well. Well, I enjoy you like it, especially when it's a first attempt. So differences in no name. So first I build more speed. Okay, I'm braking later. Braking harsher. But this is all down really to what I just described, that my car is already in a better position and I can focus much more on the apex. I don't have to now take extra caution to find my turn-in point, because I can focus on it for 2 seconds already, whereas he was focusing on the right side curb and now has half a second to refocus, which is difficult to do. So he's buying himself more time now by essentially braking a bit too early. Okay, so I have more speed, I have to brake more, it makes just perfect sense. I'm trailing a bit deeper into the corner, and you can see he's braking so early that now he's just going for the corner because he thought, okay, I've done the braking, so I have to turn in now. He does turn in and notices that, okay, that was fucking way too early, I'm gonna clip the inside curb. So he's gonna be back in the throttle, stopping the car to slow down, reducing the amount of rotation, playing with the throttle to keep the car understeery, and then right, he's going in and out of the throttle to keep the, basically he's controlling the amount of rotation with the throttle here instead of the steering wheel, what we should be doing. And then late in the corner, he notices, shit, I'm not making it, this is understeery. Now he's committing to the turning angle once he feels the confidence from locking the differential here. Pretty much the point, I think, right there. Right there, he's locking the differential, and suddenly he feels the rears in check, so he starts turning more. He feels the confidence because he has locked the rear tires pretty much unknowingly. I'll tell you that. Which is very normal to do. Most people don't know. 1% of ACC drivers might know. Back to this. Okay, so what you're seeing, and just with everything I said, just watch the corner again, okay? So not being aggressive, bringing the car over to, I can do this a bit, right? Not aggressive enough, bringing the car over to the side. Then focusing his eyes on the outside curb, then braking a bit earlier so he has more time to find the apex again. You're really finding the apex. You're looking with your eyes, where's this shit? And then he's finding it, he turns in, is too early because he braked too early as well, and then he needs a whole lot of throttle play in the middle of the corner to just correct the car's position. And very hesitant on the turning angle again, right? He feels the rear still, so there needs to be more turning angle, forcing the car into a tiny bit of understeer. But nice on the exit, he's using what's available to him. Puhon, very tricky in the Porsche, usually. Yeah. But he's managing nicely. He keeps a bit of throttle applied. Okay. Let's check Motec and let's check how much time we're trying to find here. By the way, no name from braking to entry of Puhon 1.16 to 1.4. Another 2.5 tenths through no name. I think it depends a bit on the preload, right? If you add more preload, you might get the locking a bit earlier. That's how you control it a bit, at least. But yeah, the ramp angles you sadly cannot affect, which would be a really great tool to get the car to do more interesting things. Like, especially on the BMW, we definitely want to have more rear tire locking on entry to really be able to throw the car into the corner with the amount of downforce we have on the front, but the rear is just loosely connected to the front piece of something. Anyway, Puhon, 1.4 seconds on entry. Next braking zone is going to be 1.7. So we're looking for 3/10. And just by looking at the speed trace, you can already see where the majority is going to happen. And looks pretty much like I'm carrying way more speed into the corner. So let's find out why that might be. So first thing is, I think the whole turn-in is fine. The off throttle, okay, might be a bit early, right? Then the braking comes in a bit later. He's never going off throttle completely because, again, he's very, very inconfident with the rear there. So he keeps the throttle going a bit to limit the amount of rotation. Yeah, it bleibt online, Chibi. Bleibt online. So he's controlling the amount of rotation with a bit of throttle, which is exactly why I tell people, as your first car into sim racing or ACC, don't drive the Porsche because it's treating you patterns that are likely very likely going to be hurtful on any other car. Because if you start to steer the car with throttle in a way, middle of the corner, still in the slowdown phase to limit the amount of rotation, you're learning a pattern to essentially reduce the amount of rotation the car is capable of. And you definitely don't want that. Then every corner takes longer for you, and it takes a lot of time to find a different way to find stability with the car that gives you the lap time. So this is something I always look out to get people rid of. If you're in a corner, you don't want to be on throttle unless you want to accelerate. And all this here is not, he does not want to accelerate. So I'm telling people, the throttle, just call the throttle accelerator, and don't use it when you're not trying to accelerate. Only if you want to go faster, use the throttle. If you're still going slower, or if the car is still becoming slower, don't use the throttle. It's the wrong pedal. Either use the brake or use none. But if you're using the throttle in the deceleration phase, something is in the wrong direction. Okay, so differences, earlier braking, and I think what we're seeing is, together with the turn in here and the braking, he's pitching the car forward. Let's go a tiny bit back. Make it slower. There you go. Just to explain the whole pitching, because now we're in one of the most downforce heavy corners in the entire game. Is the light better on this side? It is. It's already pitched forward. So just to make the point here, the normal ride height when the car is not braking, okay? This is the normal ride height. And this is the normal ride height on the rear when the car is going on a straight. Now, when he's coming towards the brake, that was the wrong color on the curb here. So now he's braking, and the ride height on the front is decreasing. The ride height on the rear is increasing, right? And then the car pitches forward. This is what we mean when we say the car pitches. Rear goes up, front goes down. And what comes with this, the smaller the gap towards the ground, the higher the downforce on this axle. As a very simplified principle, right? The rake itself does something to the carburetors. Let's ignore this for the time being, which now means the car has more downforce on the front than it previously had, and it has less downforce on the rear than it previously had, and now the rear is getting loose into the corner. That's what you want to keep in mind now. And what you see him do in the braking zone here is he's hitting the brakes. He has very little turning angle applied, but the car immediately goes for the corner, even has to counter steer here, because from the pitch he's inflicting on the car, on the brake here, the rear has gotten loose, and with the tiny turning input he did initially, the car's already rotating a massive amount. That's what we mean driving the car or rotating the car in pitch or during pitch in the braking zone, or however you want to call it. You're using pitch to rotate the car. And you can tell he's a bit intimidated by it, so he's really cautious on the brake. which you can see in the Motec. He's not committing to the brake because he's scared of how the car's behavior changes with a huge amount of pitch, and he doesn't have the confidence to work with the pitch throughout the trail braking phase here, right? So what you see me do is hard on the brake, bit of turning angle. If anything, this might even cause a tiny bit of understeer. Yeah, AMG anti-dive, yeah, fuck that car. But then as soon as I lift off the brake a bit, the front tire gets the grip, the car veers into the corner for me, so checking all the white lines right now. And I'm still inflicting pitch on the car, and now I have to oversteer here as well, right? And I'm working with the oversteer until I am done with the braking phase here, and only then I'm starting to turn the steering wheel towards the corner. And you can see him, he has this all available, but he's not exploiting this in a more confident fashion. So he's really cautious on the brake here, pitching the car a bit, getting a bit of that oversteer, and he's more kind of trying to work against that rather than having this work for him. And then once he has finished the braking here, again, you see the same pattern. He has a very flat plateau here in the speed trace. So now he needs to be back in the throttle middle of the corner to stop the car from slowing down even more and clipping the inside grass. Right, he has slowed down so much now. If we look at this from above, he's way before the apex of the corner, right? And he has done all his deceleration already. And if he keeps slowing the car down now, very similar issue than he had in the 180 degree, was it Bruxelles or so? He would have gone a line like this. So now he needs to throttle. He's having the right direction. The actual mistake is before. He needs to throttle now to keep the car on the track, basically. It's a webcam, George. I'm working on it. But yeah, you see what he needs to do now because he's overslowed the car. Essentially, already came to the inside. Why the Porsche is the final boss? Actually, yeah, very pitch sensitive car, and that's why usually people don't set it up with much travel on the front axle. Anyway, so yeah, he goes into the throttle. What he needs to do is extend the braking zone further into the corner. So when he's done with the braking here, then let's just assume I'm done with the braking or slow down phase up until here. And slowing down into the corner can be more than just a braking zone. It's also a tiny bit of coasting zone. So yeah, he's early into the corner, needs to throttle. And the issue with that is what he's going to have next is the car's already kind of primed for understeer because he doesn't get a quick load shift and all that. So now the car is, even though he's slower, he'll have more understeer than I do. He's progressing into the throttle, still progressing into the turning angle as he picks up the throttle. Only when he comes towards the point of rear diff lock, he's confident enough to use maximum turning angle. But by now, he has done so little of the overall rotation needed in this corner that the car is already just the angle the car is aiming, basically. That's the main difference. When you had to make the comparison, then if you extend the middle axis of his car, then my car at the same point on the track will have an angle something like this. Probably an exaggeration. The difference usually is much smaller. But that's the angle he hasn't done now, and he still has to do later on in the corner. And that's what you'll see him do next. So he turns the steering wheel, puts the power down, understeers to the exit of the corner, and with that much turning angle applied, the car's just not able to build the speed because the front tires, well, they put that into heat, basically. It depends on the track multi-made, sadly, because that's how ACC works. We have different fastest cars on different tracks. But if you want I think a good overall car was Aston, Ferrari, McLaren, Porsche, I think, roughly. So now he has the understeer going, car doesn't build the speed because he has such a high turning angle applied, and only now, very late, just this overall line here, right? He's way too far away from any apex in this corner here. Costs a lot of speed, loses a lot of time on the straight here still, right? So from the moment of full throttle, speed difference 5 kilometers, still 5, or well, still 3 here in the next braking zone, losing 10th and a half or so on the exit there. Piff Puff. Yeah, we're not talking Bob anymore, ever. Piff Puff now, I think, looks quite a bit different. So I think there's something to learn here. First, his braking much later. He kind of starts doing it here, but then takes another 10, 15 meters or so to really think, oh, no, this is the point now. Speed is pretty close to, so in this case, probably not the issue. He was just adjusting to the different speed he was carrying maybe up until this point. But we can again see a very different pattern here in the corner, right? So he's again very, very hesitant to go into the maximum turning angle. He again has the issue of very little trail braking available, has very little coasting phase in between, goes into the throttle to stabilize the car here with the differential, creates a lot of understeer, again has the plateau here middle of the corner, overslows the car, goes into the throttle to keep the car on the track away from the inside grass. So the pattern now kind of starts to keep repeating, basically, right? So the sudden going out of the brake, usually the thing that made him inconfident with the car, so he's not committing to the steering angle, he's always very cautious, then goes into the throttle to keep the car on the road and not clapping the inside grass. Let's see. So right now he has to reduce the speed so much, again way before the apex of the corner, right? If he keeps reducing speed now, then again, same issue as before, he can take a way tighter line somewhere across the grass, which of course he doesn't want to do. So he needs to go into the throttle to keep the speed up, lock the differential a bit, decrease the amount of rotation the car can do. So it's the overslowing because of the lack of trail braking, basically, and lack of coasting phase that still allows you to slow down the car a significant amount until you really need it. Also, his apex is probably a bit too early. Let's view this one more time. Well, I think this is fine if he would be carrying more speed at this point. Then hook the car on the inside curb with a bit of excess speed, scrub the bit of speed away till a later point in the corner. Right, and he can't really accelerate because he's already on the inside, but the corner is also not ended, so he needs to wait with full throttle application here. Then can't really build speed between these two corners, and he's also making, in the transition between these two corners, he's not being aggressive enough. If we have to say up until here we have a corner, and the next corner starts here, then there is a short straight in between, and in this straight, we still want to be aggressive with repositioning the car. So if you run a bit wide here, then you want to at least swing over a bit to the right side and get a tiny bit of a wider entry. But you can see him just kind of taking the shortcut here between over the straight. And you really have to be aggressive and use all the time there is on track to position the car in a better way and use a bit more track on entry, a bit more on exit. Just throw the car around a bit more. And use your time to get yourself in a more beneficial position here. And he just got a bit lazy there, basically, being happy he got the corner before done. And now kind of doing a breather on the short straight instead of keep positioning the car. And then he has a very shallow entry into the left, which will compromise his exit speed throughout this corner as well at the end of the day. Right, he's already on the inside curb way before the apex here, right? So he needs to be in the throttle again to keep the speed up and also not clip the inside grass from slowing down further. So the line difference here, basically, if I had to paint it whole, is something like his line, the pink one, too early on the inside. Then comes the lazy point, kind of here, where he does a straight, and then he's inside, waiting. Then he can go full throttle quite late. Whereas for me, I think it would be a tiny bit longer to come to the final apex rather late here. Then be more aggressive with the swing over here and just get that tiny bit of extra turn and put the apex really at the apex of the corner, right? So really somewhere here in the middle is where your apex wants to be at the end of the day. And for him, it's again a very long stretched out apex throughout the whole of the corner, rather than having a point somewhere where then you're also putting the power down usually. And that's, I think, what we should be seeing in the data here as well, right? Has the early apexes, needs to stay in the throttle, Doesn't really position the car aggressively here. Just look how hard or how much I'm turning to the right, how much I try to position the car still over to the right, especially in all this phase here. This is basically where he's going straight and I'm still positioning the car in this phase, right? I have more turning angle to the right, still getting the car over to the right, and then get a nicer, much harsher entry into the left-hander. Again, forcing the car over the front axle, creating this understeer, which gives me much more security, settles the rear end, gives me the confidence to push through this corner, rather than being very hesitant with the turning angle here, and instead using the throttle to limit the amount of rotation. Okay, so I think that the patterns by now are repeating. And then we have to just quickly still check how much time we're trying to find here. So entry piff puff 1.7 seconds. Next braking zone for Stavelo 2.3. So just piff puff alone is worth 6 up to 7/10, right? Just because bit too early on the entry, lack of trail braking, no coasting phase, which forces him to be back into the throttle because he's been overslowing the car there. Then full power, and again, very shallow entry into the left-hander, forcing him to keep the car on the track with a bit of throttle, not really daring the steering angle, not tapping into the maximum grip of the front axle, and then being very hesitant on the throttle on the exit, again being a 10-11 kilometer difference onto the short straight where he then loses almost 2/10. No, we're driving the exact same setup here. Exact same setup, more or less same conditions, I guess, because I don't know his, but top speed looked similar. Well, the car doesn't like the change of aggression. You sometimes have to be a bit easy out of the throttle, but you have to make the front axle of the car the limit when the setup-wise, the rear axle would be the limit. So you have to artificially make the front axle the limit so the car becomes stable, and you can do this by doing a bit higher turning angle. So in this case, in the right-hander 80 degrees, and the left-hander something like 80 degrees as well. So this is the sweet spot somewhat. And let's say 70% is what the limit of the front tire is. Not percent, 70 degrees is what the limit of the front tire might be. So you turn a few degrees more to get the stability in the car from a tiny amount of N-force understeer. And then hesitating into the throttle, probably creating more understeer for him from the differential lock. And that just makes his life a lot worse here. Understeering pretty much into the sand there. Right, then getting the oversteer, has still a lot of turning angle applied. Then the front end grips up, the rear loses it, has to correct, loses more speed. Same thing here a bit. Again, what we saw from Bruxelles to No Name is where he became a bit lazy transitioning the car, right? So he comes from the curb here, and then he goes a diagonal line over to the curb here. Now his car is pointing, if you extend this line, somewhere into the wall. So he's already, or he still has to do car positioning for this curb. And I just want to emphasize, you want to be a tiny bit more aggressive here as well. Bring the car over to the side, straighten it up before you have to brake, because else the car is going to be sensitive when you have to hit the brake and turn the car. You want to have a tiny bit of almost straight braking phase, which stabilizes the car a lot. Interesting, okay. I think you can tell by now, right? See the same pattern with the throttle there. Let's look into the Motec here. Earlier braking, much harsher braking, complete absence of trail braking, forcing or bringing the car into a state of having a plateau here, which means he has overslowed the car very early on in the corner. We're looking at a 21 kilometer difference when he stops braking, right? So this is really a lot, or let's say 19, which is still a lot. And then again, he comes to the corner. Now he's already turning angle applied here. End of where he stops braking 100%. He has some turning angle applied. Now the front tire will be able to build the grip. The car goes for the corner, starts rotating. He's already too slow. So the car kind of indicates to him, I'll hit the inside curb or even the grass. So his next reaction is, oh fuck. and he goes fully into the throttle, locking the rear differential to some degree, accelerating the car, lifting the nose up, changing the aerodynamic balance, and now the car understeers, right? And only once he has the understeer, he feels, okay, now the car is stable again, and now he starts going into the turning angle. Notice, okay, car doesn't respond to my turning input. He goes a bit off the throttle, opening up the diff a bit, car rotates a bit more, and this is the way he controls the car here. So he's kind of coming for the corner. He's not sure yet how the car will behave, which is mainly down to the sudden release of the brake here, because the car shows him a sudden reaction when the braking stops and the tires are pointing into a direction, then they suddenly build the grip and the car goes. And this is the moment that is always difficult to handle for him. So he's very cautious with the steering input, then uses the throttle a lot to control the amount of rotation. Once the car is stabilized from the throttle input, he is more keen on using more steering input, then notices the car doesn't respond, then opens up on the throttle a bit. So he's doing a lot of adjustments there. Can you see this even? No. He's doing a lot of adjustments there with different things to fiddle out the amount of rotation that he wants to have in the corner. Well, I don't want to brag, but I started sim racing half a year before I went professional in Live for Speed. So I don't know, that was something in me. On the other hand, I was 18 when I did that, and I had my first steering wheel at 8, so I guess there was some learning very early on. But I probably was mediocre for the first 10 years where I didn't really drive, maybe like that. Okay, so now he has the understeer then coming into the corner. Let's view it one more time. Hard braking, car doesn't respond. Now he goes off the brake, the car will respond. And then he's like, okay, now the car is coming for the inside curb much too early. He'll have a very early apex. He doesn't want to have that. Maybe even clip the grass if he keeps decelerating. So goes into the throttle to lock the rear differential, lift the nose up, stabilize the car, reduce the amount of rotation. Now the car is stable and he's like, okay, now I can turn a bit more. Let's position it. The car doesn't respond to the turning input because he did all the things with the throttle. Now he opens the throttle again a bit for the car to get more rotation. And then now he thinks, okay, I'm past the apex, the exit is right in front of me, I should be accelerating, but now the car still has to do a lot of turning, so the steering angle is quite high. Puts the power down very, very hesitantly because the car is still understeering, onto the Astro, power down, oversteer kicking in because he's coming from a very high turning angle, very typical behavior. And now for the next one, which I think he did easily flat, so nothing to correct here in this one. Probably nothing correct here in Blanchiment as well. And we're looking at the last braking point. Let's just see what he loses into and out of Stavelo. So braking point 2.3 seconds down, 2.3 and a half, something like that. Then into the corner, loses a bit, middle of the corner faster. So same thing we've seen for a couple times now. Then puts the power down much later than I did. I have by now 11-12 kilometers more in the exit, which I'll very likely carry through the next right-hander, carry onto the straight, and keep gaining time till the next braking phase. So from the entry here, 2.3, to the next braking, 2.9. So he's losing 6/10 basically in a single corner, whereas the rest is flat out. And that's really it all starts with a lack of trail braking. That's everything basically. Fix the braking, have more, where am I? Sorry, here. Fix the trail braking or add trail braking, get in control of the car with the brake rather than with the throttle and steering and blah, blah, blah. And make sure you pull the speed on the exit. That's the most important bit here. You can be slow in the corner, it's not a problem. The mid-corner difference here is 10-11 kilometers. I'm a lot slower, but I'm building a lot of speed on the exit, which gives me the time onto the straight here. Yeah, indeed, you're true. There's more turning input in Blanchiment here. 20 degrees more, so good spot, even though we went there full speed. But yeah, you know the car. You need to know the car. Yeah, he's probably scrubbing a tiny bit of speed there. Don't think it's too major, just a short amount of time, but you're right. Okay, let's check in Motec first if there's actually anything. Usually the chicane is one of my weaker corners. And I put a lot of emphasis on the exit. So on entry 2.96, over the line 3.1. So 1.5 tenths lost somewhere here. Braking point a bit later. carrying more speed in 2, but then I might have been a bit early, so you see me lift here, then trailing a bit more. Maybe this isn't his biggest weakness here. Carries more speed into the last left-hander, but I carry more into the straight. Let's just view it. Maybe there's more to see in the line. Takes I'm not actually sure. Tortellini, what do you say? I feel like using the curb on entry leads to more issues than it helps you. It feels like the car is hesitant to turn in because the curb is a bit slippery. Also feels like the braking doesn't work as much. So I usually only just about hit the curb on braking here. I'm not taking this wide of an entry. Ah, okay, I can definitely see where the time is lost. So what he did was something like, where are we? Here's the corner. Hello. Never use it, there you go. I was thinking so. So his line, again, is something like he's braking very long in the straight line here. Then turns in quite late, has a late apex, barely doesn't use this curb at all, basically. Then has the car in a really nice position, so you could do something like have a real, okay, I'm exaggerating, okay, but have a really nice wide entry is what he could do to build a lot of speed for the exit here, because this is a nice position to be in, but he's not capitalizing on it at all. Instead, he's taking the shortcut here, takes this entry, and this is going to cost him all the speed on the exit here. So instead of the dotted line that he could have taken, again, he becomes a bit lazy here in the chicane. It's what a lot of people do, right? I'm not trying to blame him or anything, just being showing you the harsh truth. So he's again a bit lazy here positioning the car, and then loses a nice entry position for the left-hander here. Whereas my line would more be something like start the turn in from here, clip this car harsh because the curb gives you additional rotation when you hit it at this point here in a nice fashion, have a bit of more turning angle applied there, which gives you the stability. The curb usually kicks the tail out, a bit of more turning angle brings you the understeer back. Well, good luck, Chevy. And then again, being aggressive here to position the car, get somewhat of an entry position and accelerate the car away. This should be a lap. Was a long stream, I think. And I think I will just leave it at that. I can totally imagine Tortellini doing that. All right, guys. I guess time to end the stream because I'm hungry. Unless you have a better idea. We can watch my lab in comparison one more time if you like. But I tend to idealize my laps, and I only did 10 or so. Yeah, indeed, you found the straight in there. So just for those who came later. So let's go. I mean, I'm not going as detailed through my lab, just giving you a rough one. So turning in a bit earlier, longer trail braking phase usually, holding the brake there a bit, and everything. That's why I hate when all the real life series, they do a hot lap commented by one of the drivers. There's just way too little time to talk about the things that are interesting. Well, it's only similar good. Not as good. The price premium is insane for the last 10%. Using the curb, more turning angle, stability in the car, more turning angle. More turning angle. Full throttle much earlier, rely more on the rear, kick the tail, or, I mean, it doesn't really want to kick out, right? But work around the diff lock, now do the V into the corner, wait a lot, put the power down, come for the second apex, and position the car much aggressively here to the right side. Have a bit of a straight face before you need to find the apex. And now into Puja and just check the amount of pitch I'm working with in the trail braking. It's also fast, right? I agree, let's do this one more time in half speed. Just watch the rotation the car's getting from the trail braking alone. It's still short. But then, much turning applied, wait for a bit, put the power down hard and completely. And never hesitate on the throttle. You're only creating more understeer and more issues. Again, you see the whole trail braking phase is where the rear is really used, and I take advantage of that, rotating the car deep into the corner with the brake before I actually need to use the steering wheel to rotate it. Much turning angle applied, keep it tight over here, keep positioning the car, right? Keep positioning. And then throw it into, over the curb, put the, as soon as you hit the curb, it's a good indication to be able to put the power down, because now the curb will slow down the inside of the car just a tiny bit so you get more rotation, and then going into the power locks, the diffs, brings the weight to the rear and creates a bit more understeer against the additional oversteering moment that the car was inflicting on you. And now again, be a little more aggressive, bring it over to the left side, right? Bring the car straight, trail into the corner a bit, let it roll, have a late apex, and then into the throttle more aggressively to not create unnecessary understeer. Flat out here, flat out here. Wow, even even in accelerated time, the Porsche is slow on the straight. And then a bit of a different line, I guess, through the last chicane. Only just about using the curb there, or not at all. Clipping the curb harshly on the inside. Position the car for longer. Aim for a late apex. Try to build speed for the straight. Lap done. Stream done. I thank you everyone for joining, and hopefully see you very soon. No need to stop, but actually just stopping ACC at this point. How stiff is your brake pedal? This is going to be a 54 kilos roughly. That's what I've set up. I can probably do the cam raw. There you go. So this has turned into a just chatting stream now. Welcome. And everything ACC is only background sound. Steering with a brake pedal, yeah, that's a good way to use it. Is double apex here useful in all cars? I tend to say that I think lines are very similar across cars, I have to say. Of course, there are tiny differences between the cars and the exact timing or so, but more or less it's very similar where the car needs to be placed in this game. Usually, I think on most tracks and most corners, I will somewhat aim for a late apex rather than an early one or so. It's just, yeah, something the game seems to like, with how the traction control takes away all your power, so you want to have the car straightened. Yeah. I'm not hating the Porsche. I'm hating the Porsche. I think it's the way it drives is just really not how a car should behave. I think it's much too aggressive. I just like a car that when you go onto the power, you want to control the oversteer with the throttle pedal, and on the Porsche you kind of only get understeer on power, and if you get oversteer, it's usually very snappy, and then traction control cuts the power. It's just not it just doesn't require the driving style that I like to drive. I seem to be much more a fan of very classic front engine, rear end transmission kind of cars. Sam, there's something coming I can't talk too much about. There will be more data, not necessarily on RT. We'll see about that. It's still things coming. There will be data sooner or later for everyone, for everything. Let's say it this way. Okay, how much time you spent to make setup for event? I think since we're driving the BMW for a couple of years now, we no, this is nothing against RST at all. I think it does the job terrifically that we've started, but I want to do something different, and he has different ideas with the tool. So for now, there's RST and there's the data. I'll try to get more data in, but I'm really limited in time overall. And doing the data is just, yeah, very time intense. Flicker dogs, let me scroll up 1 second. Let the diff work. Coasting was slightly accelerating. The thing is, if you put the power down, the rear axle locks the rear tires together and they spin at the same speed. But if you leave the throttle going, the rear tires can spin at independent speed and the car can rotate. And put the power down, they spin together again, creating understeer. So letting the diff work means go off throttle, open the differential, and the car can spin at independent speed. How do you find the Bentley? Bit too easy, sitting on the wrong side. What's that? Don't get me started, totally. Maybe in the off season I'll take the Porsche just to make a point. So Shibi, Setup Coaching, Schulung, Motec. Nein. Diese Setup-Geschichte ist so zeitintensiv und es ist auch so persönlich und es ist auch jedes Auto so unterschiedlich, dass ich habe das nicht im Repertoire sozusagen, jetzt ein x-beliebiges Auto für irgendeine Strecke einfach so einzustellen, mir nichts, dir nichts. Das ist sehr schwierig. Aber da haben wir ja den Kevin Friedrich, aka Quitsch, in meinem Discord, der bietet sowas an. Hey Mevit, I'm trying. Currently time very limited. I figured out that doing this data it takes a huge amount of time. So I'll try to slot this in, but the whole topic is not forgotten. There will be something coming where we should have way more data for a lot more combos. The diff does definitely not work the same in all cars. No, the principle applies, but some cars have the whole pattern much more pronounced than other cars. So for example, on the Porsche, the diff locks very easily. On the BMW, it locks very easily as soon as the turbo spins up. On the what else do we have? What else do we have? I think the McLaren locks really early. But on the Bentley, for example, the differential locks really late. So you can deploy a lot of power on the Bentley without going full throttle, and the diff will still be open for a very long time, and you get extra rotation from that. That's a Bentley trait. I mean, if you're doing a gear change in the corner, you have too much throttle applied because like it's a very harsh gear change, right? The electronics, they slam the gear in and that spins up the rear tires when you have the power applied. So that usually creates a grip loss on the rear axle, and that will give you the oversteer. So if you do the upshift mid-corner, you need to lift on the throttle a tiny bit to make the slamming the gear in less brutal. Coast just preload. Now, no, it's not completely open. No, it's just more open than when you have the throttle applied, of course. But we can control the coasting and power ramp angles here, right? But you still see the pattern. As long as you're off throttle, the rear tires spin independently to some degree, not entirely, of course. They're always locked together in a way, but I'm just trying to make the principle clear. Maybe they're allowed to, I don't know, have a difference of 5% or whatever. I don't know. Tiny numbers, okay? But it still has an effect on the car, of course. And all cars have different coast ramp angles, for sure. I use only the Bentley, though. 200 hours of ACC in sim racing and in general. Best in Monza is 149. 220 Spa, Laguna 124. So it's pretty much 3 seconds off everywhere. 2 to 3. Is that good? In the end, Alexoe, it depends very much on what the weather is, how much fuel there's in there, right? In ACC, you have a huge gap from a full car to an empty car, from a warm track to a cold track. There's probably 3 seconds in there. So unless you're driving in very cold, very empty conditions, your lap times are probably fine. Opinion on the digital braking in ACC. I guess it's just people have built setups around their shit braking. So I don't think it's an ACC thing. It's a GT3 car thing, which has to be driven by gentleman drivers, and they shouldn't be dying. So the cars are very lenient with mediocre pedal inputs. And I think that's probably realistic, sadly. And the higher the preload, the less the tires will rotate independently. But you don't have too much effect with a preload at the end of the day, sadly. Last question. How can I improve my fast bump rebound settings in Olton? I have no fucking clue. You have to play around. I think it depends on the car. Some cars will maybe need more fast damping. Some might take less. I think the best idea for Olton Park is to raise the car overall to get the ground clearance. Basically start at the top, go lower, and then when the bottoming out starts over the curbs, that's when you gotta stop with the right height. Race and quality setups, to be honest, balance and account for the fuel. Because when the fuel tank's in front, the car is going to drive very different, so you have to change the aero balance a bit to accommodate for that. Making sure the front and rear tires are being used over the stint to the same amount, so the balance doesn't change too much throughout the stint, so the car always drives the same somewhat. So just checking the wear after 5 to 10 laps and checking if the difference front to rears is very small, and then you know your car's likely going to stay rather similar throughout the stint. No more. I'm out of drinks, guys. I need to go shopping before they close. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Let's maybe do this again sometime soon. Now I'm gonna charge this guy for the coaching that he's about to be able to watch. And I see you all very soon. Join the Discord, become a member for more of those coaching sessions, because there's like 50 on there already. Knows your ACR always just under 28 pieces. Yeah, there's like just aim for 27.3 to 27.8. That's your ideal pressure range. That's where you want to be. All tracks, all cars. Okay, guys. Thank you all for watching. See you very soon, and have a good start to the week. Bye bye. Where's the shitty button? Here.